Our story begins sometime between 4 and 6 millennia ago on the planet that would come to be known as Viewros. A species of formerly amphibious beings that called themselves Lemorn arrive from an unknown location and discover a curious specimen of native flora, what they call the Sacred Tree. A tree that would mark the beginning and also the end of this ancient lost civilization. But first, welcome to the channel. I am Phantom Leaves and you are looking quite lovely today. Thank you for joining me. Let's get right into the history of the Lemorn, planet Viewros, and the advent of psychic abilities in the Metroid universe, introduced in Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Now, it is not known where the Lemorn came from, but it is written that they discovered the sacred tree, and the priest named Thesach was the first to commune with it. Lemorn culture began to revolve around the tree, and this marks the beginning of the Ancient Era. A select few individuals were inherently gifted with the ability to harness the energy within themselves to perform previously impossible feats with only their minds. Wordless communication, divining sacred geometries, and the manipulation of space-time were some of these accomplishments. These gifted individuals would come to be the priest caste in Lemorn society. One of these priests, Shea, had a deep understanding of space and time, and she created the first teleporter. In the most ancient of times, a prophecy would be perceived. A chosen one would arrive sometime in the future to preserve their legacy, though at the time of the prophecy, no one knew what this really meant. The Lemorn would pilgrimage to the Temple of Memory built underneath the sacred tree, and there they would die and become one with the psychic energy within it. The psychic energy is not given a name in the universe or in the game, but it is clear from context clues that the energy that the Lemorn are utilizing is analogous to the energy we would call Shakti, or more specifically, Kundalini. For the uninitiated, Kundalini is a life force or divine feminine energy that was first described in ancient Hindu texts. A coiled serpent, initially found at the base of the spine, that is closely associated with the Mahadevi, the Supreme Mother Goddess. Through ritual, meditation, and other practices like yoga, Kundalini can be awakened. It should be noted that Kundalini, being a divine feminine energy, is not strictly limited to women or females, and it is found within all people. As in the Hindu religion, everyone and everything is a part of Brahman, or in other words, divine. Being an energy associated with the Supreme Goddess, there are several meditation and yoga practices that invoke the yoni, as focusing and drawing upon the innate Shakti or goddess energy within oneself can awaken the Kundalini, allowing it to flow up through the body, eventually energizing the whole person and opening the third eye. I don't think it's a coincidence that when Samus gains the psychic crystal, it coils up and around her, much like a serpent, before embedding itself as her third eye. Yoni is a term that many players of Metroid Prime 4 are well aware of now, given the abundance of yonic imagery seen in the architecture from the ancient era specifically. It is believed in the real world today that the most ardent of yogis who are able to allow Kundalini and Shakti to flow through the body can gain siddhis or iddhis, two terms mostly used synonymously, and the latter of which translates directly to, you guessed it, psychic powers. So, the parallels between the earthly beliefs and these of the Lemorn on planet Viewros are extremely clear, and of course I am not saying that the Lemorn are Hindu, but rather that their culture and belief system are heavily inspired by the same divine revelations. The Lemorn even have 4 arms, a classic trait of divine beings in many South Asian religious denominations. So I am going to sometimes refer to these psychic abilities as Kundalini from here on out, since the similarities and inspiration seem so apparent to me. This life energy that the Lemorn priests could harness might seem out of place in a sci-fi setting. However, there is a great deal of precedent for this in the Metroid franchise. The Illuminoth from Metroid Prime 2 were masters of harnessing light and dark energy, yet another divine energy paradigm that is able to be materialized from the universe itself. And even more prominently, the Chozo were known to harness mystical energy in most of their technology. Samus's suit, designed by the Chozo, could be described as being made of energy, as she can materialize and dematerialize it at will, and that is very closely linked to her mental acuity. It quantizes her own life energy, displays it as part of her HUD. It manipulates energy to fire beams, creates missiles and bombs, and is entirely modular, being able to absorb different energies and take on different forms based on the nature of said energies. The Chozo were deeply spiritual, and the colonists on Talon 4 acquired foresight through their spiritual practices, which do mirror the Lemorn in more ways than one. The keystone in all of this is the titular Metroids themselves, who were created by the Chozo and feed on life energy specifically. It is my theory that this life energy that the Metroids feed on, the unnamed energy that the Chozo harness, the light and dark energies of the Illuminoth, and the psychic energy of the Lemorn are all facets of one unified force. But the Lemorn were not a warrior race. There are no records of them going to war, and aside from creations made much later in the timeline for a specific purpose that we will discuss, there are no weapons that bear their mark. They lived peacefully in the jungles around the sacred tree and developed a culture that venerated 3 elements of nature: fire, water, or ice, and electricity. It is through their studies and veneration of the elements that they happened upon a discovery: lightning could infuse inanimate objects with life. The first of these revolutionary inventions was the Viola bike, which allowed the Lemorn to leave their jungle home and expand across the planet. With the advent of Viola and planetary expansion, the ancient era would close and make way for the machine era. There is a stark shift in architecture when the Lemorn moved from the ancient era to the machine era. Simplified, flowing designs are replaced by complex, repeating patterns, function over form design philosophy, and dramatic increase in technological advancements. Nowhere is this more apparent than Volt Forge, a gigantic factory complex that was erected to supply the growing population with Viola bikes needed to cross the expanse of Soul Valley, which at the beginning of the era was a lush grassland. In fact, Viola seemed to be the crown jewel of their civilization, receiving several updates throughout the years to better accommodate the exploratory settlers, including one revision that would alter the bike's shape completely, allowing it to hover over magma. This specific innovation would allow them the discovery of green energy within the magma of Viewros, a discovery that would alter the course of history. Green energy would allow their technology to advance even farther and faster than before. In small doses, the Lemorn scientists found that green energy would stimulate reactivity and produce energy in both mechanical and biological systems. Nanomachines and other devices such as the cargo transporters, of which only 2 were constructed, were fueled by green energy. Eventually, their facilities became so complex and even dangerous at times that automatons were invented to help maintain their operation, even in the absence of any Lemorn operators. An extraction facility was constructed within the local volcano, facilitating the harvest of immense amounts of green energy that further fueled the Industrial Revolution. But deep in one of the mines, another even more consequential discovery was made. These would be known as the Viewros crystals. So up until this point, psychic abilities were not unheard of, but they were extremely rare. As I stated before, only a small number of gifted individuals had a natural disposition for harnessing psychic energy, and they quickly became members of the priesthood. But everything changed with the discovery of Viewros crystals. These facilitated an expedited pathway for the full power of the mind to manifest in any Lemorn who had one of these crystals embedded in their forehead, acting as a third eye that would draw up the psychic power through the body and establish a permanent hold, allowing the user to maintain a state of Kundalini awakening without needing to activate it through ritual practice. The mineral resources of Viewros began to grow scarce, and the Lemorn began to rely more and more on their newfound psychic abilities rather than the machines that propelled them to such great heights. So thus, the machine era began to rapidly transition into the final period of the Lemorn, the psychic era. As psychic abilities became more and more commonplace, the dwellings and architecture of the various settlements began to shift once more. All of the previous settlements, even those stretching back to the ancient era, such as the Temple of Memory, were retroactively outfitted with psychic mechanisms, and the architecture began to make a return to the flowing, Ionic designs of the past. A new version of Viola was created, outfitted with psychic resonators that would harmonize with a single user, which allowed for greater integration as well as additional security. The use of green energy slowed down as the emphasis on psychic abilities rose to prominence, but the facilities used to harvest it were not shut down. However, as Lemorn society was rapidly advancing spiritually and technologically, the weight of their progress began to take a toll on the world. Specifically, Soul Valley began to suffer more than other areas, and in the wake of the technological boom, it began to transform into an arid desert. Apparently, the Lemorn appreciated their desert ecosystem about as much as the average player, and so they began to look for ways to repair the ecosystem that they had damaged. Looking to the green energy, which they still did not fully understand, they deducted that if they were to subtly introduce the green energy into the environment, it could bolster the ecosystem through its energy-generating properties and allow it to survive through the industrialization. The order was issued to modify the harvesting plant in the volcano into a dispersal facility, building a giant cannon with airburst shells full of the purest green energy that could be extracted, and launching them over Soul Valley. They should have conducted more research because, unfortunately for the Lemorn, they could not see what was about to transpire. After repeated exposure to the green energy and the green energy crystals that coalesced throughout the desert, the Lemorn began to change. In violent bursts, one by one, the people exposed to the green energy began to twist and writhe, skeletal and muscular structures warping and changing into abhorrent monsters with a taste for flesh. These poor transformed souls were dubbed the Grievers. The transformation of the Lemorn species didn't happen all at once, and the Grievers who were able to be pacified were cryogenically frozen and transported en masse to a research station high up in the mountains. Here, research was overseen by a priest named Chatoyan Dvulun, or Chatoya for short, and work began on the afflicted populace. They discovered that while the monsters were genetically identical to unafflicted Lemorn, the energy was actually manipulating which genes would be expressed, and so work was done to prevent this from occurring. It also appeared that the Lemorn are the only beings susceptible to the mutagenic effects of green energy, since other creatures could be exposed and grow in strength but not have their gene expression altered. But time was running out, and there was no choice but to fight back. The first weapons on record were constructed to combat the rising tide. The maintenance drones were outfitted with offensive lasers. The desert began to fill with prowling automatons, both on the sand and in the sky. And an entirely new weapon, the Cybot Soldier, would enter full-scale production. Originally, they were built as servants for the Lemorn, performing mundane household tasks at the command of their psychic masters. But when the Griever threat became too large to ignore, their potential as frontline soldiers was realized. Several models were produced, each providing a strategic role on the battlefield, and their numbers grew to the size of a large army. It was also in this desperate hour that Chrono Tower, the only example of completely psychic-era architecture, was built. Its design heavily drawing upon the style of construction used in the ancient era. The master teleporter at the top would be the Lemorn's last resort if all else failed. However, it was all for naught. The experiments underway in the research lab in the mountains had failed. None of the test subjects were able to be reverted back to their original forms permanently. By now, the plague, deemed the Great Tragedy, had consumed nearly the entire population. Chatoya, leader of the research facility, ordered all survivors back to Chrono Tower, and the final preparations for their departure would begin. Their traditions of honoring and becoming one with the sacred tree upon death had waned with the advent of technology. But the legacy of all who came before was preserved in its grandiose boughs. Yet the tree would not produce fruit. They could not take this legacy with them. But Chatoya recalled the prophecy, the legend spoken of way back in the ancient era before the advent of machines. Someone deemed the Chosen One would one day visit their world, and maybe this person would be the one to propagate the tree and continue their legacy. The work began immediately. First, the sacred tree would need an immense amount of power to produce the memory fruit capable of containing the memories of every Lemorn. The only energy source abundant enough for this project was the green energy that had caused so much destruction, but through their research they had learned that the Lemorn were the only beings that would be negatively affected by it, possibly due to their use of the psychic crystals. And so, as safely as they could, they began to gather these crystals and leave them in places for the Chosen One to find. Next, they would create a specialized psychic crystal, not unlike the Viewros crystals embedded in the foreheads of the Lemorn themselves, that would awaken the Kundalini within their chosen hero and allow them to interface with their psychic technology. The last part of the puzzle were the teleporter keys. They had enough foresight to realize that they didn't want just anyone to be responsible for their legacy. And so they created sacred shrines with gateways to pocket realms where a master teleporter key would be found. These sacred shrines would be psychically linked to a guardian, a local creature or machine that had both intelligence and a mutual respect for the Lemorn. In all but one case, this was a naturally occurring organism that had developed a relationship with the people of Viewros, and in the case of Volt Forge, this responsibility was given to the Overseer AI. These guardians would not allow the sacred shrine to manifest except for the Chosen One, or upon the guardian's death, as the psychic link between the beast and the shrine would be broken in that case. With the pieces in place, it was time for the Lemorn to depart the world that they had doomed. 12 priests gathered, and they traveled through the teleporter, searching for their Chosen One, and as far as any other survivors, only Chatoya himself is recorded making it to the tower. He chooses to stay behind, to leave messages for their chosen hero. As for the last of the Lemorn, they were twisted into hungering, loathsome creatures, and Viewros fell silent. The story picks up an untold amount of years later, centuries, even ages perhaps, across the galaxy in a parallel dimension where one of the 12 Lemorn priests found himself, the planet Tanamar. The priest did not survive the passage of time, but he did leave behind a relic, a teleporter, a gateway back to his home planet that would soon come into the possession of the Galactic Federation, and through them, the prophesied one, Samus Aran. And that is the lore behind Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, with a bit of interpretation and a healthy dose of speculation on top of that. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, I would greatly appreciate it if you would share it with someone else who might be interested. Leave a like and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to support me with the money, you can join the channel as a member, where you get access to my conspiracy boards, or you can buy my artwork at the link below. Code PHANTOM15 gets you 15% off your entire order, by the way. But I'm so glad that you chose to spend your time listening to me, so thank you. And until next time, the lore video is over, but the galaxy is at peace.